Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, the state of housing, social and private, has become one of the most pressing issues of our times. And in the latest in our series on Britain's housing crisis, we go to Canterbury. For 99 years, it was solid Conservative territory. And then, in June, it elected a Labour MP. The defeated Tory, Sir Julian Brazier, blames the state of Britain's housing market for the loss. Home to 4 universities and popular with Londoners who can't afford to buy in the capital, Canterbury is seeing more and more would-be home buyers priced out of the market. We asked Sir Julian for his view on what needs to be done.
Canterbury. The problem here is typical of much of southern England, with house prices and rental levels out of the reach of many people. According to the Nationwide Building Society, the average first-time buyer in southeast England paid more than 6 times the average level of earnings. And in London it's worse, with a ratio of 10 to 1. So people move from London to areas like this. And added to that, we also have the largest concentration of students in the country, so student landlords are competing in the market too. I was the Conservative MP here for 30 years, and I believe that the diminishing prospects in housing for young people played a crucial role in losing this seat. The sad fact is that for many young people today, the chances of ever living in a home of the sort that their parents enjoy are growing less and less. Tom Barton is one of them. He's a Conservative activist and an economics student here, and his situation's typical. Like many people studying here, he won't be able to afford to live in Canterbury, and he won't be able to afford to live in London, where he comes from, either.
For a few years I will be back living with my parents, even when I want to pursue my own career into the wider world. Ideally I'd like to not live with my parents but live where I grew up, so in Bexley, but being in southeast London that's very, very expensive. My second option would be Canterbury, but where people from London can't afford London, they then come out to the rest of the southeast, which then pushes up prices in places such as Canterbury.
So how does my party deal with the crisis that looms over this country's younger generation and housing?
Well, residents are crying out for affordable housing. They're competing with students, people moving down from London and people buying second and holiday homes for entry-level houses. You know, there's terraced houses in the centre of Whitstable that are on the market for £500,000, and they would have traditionally been for young people.
Insofar as it can, what is the council doing about this?
Well, Canterbury City Council has just adopted its local plan, which paves the way for building 16,000 new homes across the district up until 2031. We've also set up a social lettings agency, which should be launched shortly, which will increase the number of houses available on the private rental market, hopefully making housing more affordable and meeting residents' needs in the area.
Discussions of housing policy seldom mention the role of immigration in swelling demand. But I believe the principal factor in the housing crisis has been a rise in population unparalleled since the Victorian era. According to the Office of National Statistics, Britain's population is rising at around 500,000 per year. That's a city the size of Liverpool every year. And nearly 2/3 of that is coming from immigration. We must understand that the housing crisis is about supply and demand, and we must reclaim the high ground by making it clear that it's not an attack on individual immigrants to say that our housing and infrastructure are gravely overstretched. We must tackle the hard issue and face up to the impact that unlimited immigration has had on the housing prospects of the next generation. If we don't, we and the country will pay a terrible price.
Sir Julian Brazier, the former Tory MP for Canterbury, well, he came into the studio a short time ago, and I asked him what his evidence was that immigration is pushing up house prices.
The ONS say that the population growth from 2006 to 2026 is 9 million people. That's a rise from 61 million to 70 million in just 20 years.
Yeah, but there's lots of evidence that immigrants don't in fact lead to rising house prices, because when they first come, they live in high densities, in poor areas. They don't take social housing. They're in the private rented market. And there's actually some evidence that immigrants cause house prices to fall because the indigenous population leave. The total rise in population reflects net immigration, which on the ONS figures is almost 2/3 of the rise in population. But underneath that net figure, we're disguising the fact that a lot of the people who are leaving are elderly people retiring to Spain, Australia and other places, whereas the vast majority of immigrants who come in to settle are young people who will be having families. If you look at primary schools and the way they are so overloaded, you can see the problem is going to get a lot worse. You know, but you still haven't offered me any evidence that this leads to rising house prices. I can see that we have a rising population, but where is the evidence that that is driving the housing crisis?
House prices, whether we talk about purchase or we talk about rental, and they're both pretty terrible now, the situation in London and the South East, and other parts of the country too. In both cases, it's about how you match supply to demand. Now, I totally agree we need to do more about the supply side, but a rise in population of 9 million people in 20 years, that's almost 500,000 a year, is bound to have an enormous effect on that equation. I think that we need to ask ourselves, which immigrants do we most need? Now, I'm all for taking, in addition to that, we have responsibilities where there are genuine cases with refugees and so on. But if you look, for example, at European immigration, last year, 31% of the people who came in from the EU were unemployed. Almost the same proportion were low-skilled or unskilled.
Yeah, but they're not going to be the ones who are driving up house prices, are they?
Each person who comes here is eventually going to need somewhere to live. They want to have partners, they're going to want to have children and so on. They're going to need homes too. And a situation where we have more people coming in each year than going out, to the tune of a city of Liverpool each year, is simply unsustainable in housing.
Don't you think you are stoking anti-immigrant feeling when the real villain of this piece is a failure of government, a failure of local government to build houses, a failure of government to allow building on the green belt, a failure of government to manage our services and our society for our new realities?
I'm not seeking to blame anybody in this. What we have to do, though, is address both sides of the housing equation. We've got to stop the runaway demand through the growth in population, much of it driven through immigration. But we also have to build more houses. But there is a limit to how much house building we can do in any one year, even if we got all those other things fixed, because of all these other issues, like water supply, like drainage, like roads and so on, many of which are very serious problems in Kent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, for anyone hoping for council housing across England, it's an almost impossible struggle. There's a 1.2 million strong waiting list, and more than half of the households waiting are currently living in overcrowded or insanitary housing. In London, where private rent is high, those at the sharp end are often the city's newest arrivals. Thousands of low-wage migrant workers, which the capital relies on, who are often forced to live in cramped and sometimes dangerous conditions, as Simeon Brown has been finding out.
It's 7 a.m. and we are with a convoy of officers delivering a wake-up call to rogue landlords.
Someone's coming in, right.
The London Borough of Newham is a battleground of the housing crisis.
Hi, good morning, madam. There's nothing to worry about.
The rate of overcrowding here is 8 times the national average. This house is suspected of breaching housing safety guidelines and is now being raided.
Oh, please.
Hi, it's the police, open the door. No, it's here, no. How many here?
No, just me.
Just you?
Yeah.
Okay.
This one outside, another man.
There are several families and young children living here. Houses like these are known as HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. They're on the rise and up to 3 times more lucrative for landlords. But there can be conflict between strangers, forced to live under one roof. Now these jagged shards are a safety risk for a house of 11, including 5 young children. In the back of the yard is a breeze-block shed with an alfresco washing area. The council tell us it's an illegal structure that has to come down, but it's the first cramped home of this newborn baby who lives here with her mother and father.
You lived in the front room first of all?
Yeah.
And then they took you out of that to make it into a living room?
Yeah,
and put you in here?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so angry. I'm so angry. I'm so sorry for you. This is awful.
Yeah.
So they got you in, they got you paying the rent.
Yeah.
They got you living here.
They say now you have baby, you come and leave this room. This room is big. I don't want this room.
This is
so they say no, we want that room.
That living room is bigger than this room. I've just, you know, I can see that.
This housing officer promises to help, but they won't be rehousing her today.
Yeah,
there's no water here, is there?
It's very dangerous for my baby, I know that. It's coming, some cockroaches and some...
Cockroaches?
Yeah,
right,
cockroach.
Okay.
Newham has a council waiting list of over 20,000, the highest in London. That figure nationwide is 1.1 million. Because of the shortage of social housing, Britain is reliant on the private rented sector, and often the most desperate residents are the city's newest arrivals, immigrants.
Clearly, people shouldn't be living in a shed, but we've got a licensing scheme in Newham which allows us to find properties like this and then allows us to deal with them. If we didn't have licensing, it would be hard to do anything at all here very quickly.
There is no central government regulator for private landlords, so enforcement falls to overstretched local authorities with limited powers. In Newham, all landlords must get a licence from the council if they want to rent a property, but the council can only administer this with government permission, and it's unclear if the government will allow them to continue.
What's it got to do with national government if we want to bring something in locally and our residents think it's the right thing? It's time we followed democracy. 81% of our residents say they want to keep this scheme. It's scandalous. I want to see some landlords go to prison for the way they treat these people.
But the only person we saw taken into custody is a migrant who the police say overstayed his visa. Undocumented migrants are ripe for exploitation. But even those with their documents in order face a harsh housing market. Across town, we encountered a different pressure migrant families are under. Peering out into the world is Matteo. He's 9 years old, a football fanatic.
Welcome to a flat.
And my tour guide for the afternoon.
Just down there, and then you can just cross in.
Matteo lives on the first floor with his family of 5.
But one lives in Spain.
So who sleeps here?
My mum and me.
Your mum and you?
Mhm.
And who sleeps in that room?
My brother in the sofa.
Yeah.
My other big brother sleeps down there.
Yeah.
And my dad sleeps on the floor, which basically they have another thing. Yeah. They sleep over here. Okay. This is where we eat, where we do our homework and play football over here.
All the rooms here seem to merge into one, including the kitchen, which tags onto the only bedroom with no door separating the two. In this house, there's no such thing as privacy for John, who turns 13 next month.
I wish I had more space, and I wish I had more privacy.
And how often do you think about the kind of house that you'd like to live in?
Almost every day. Yeah, like always dream about it.
Would you like to move into a bigger house?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a great thing to do.
The family migrated to London from Spain almost 4 years ago to find work during Europe's economic slump. But both parents were born in Colombia, where father Alvaro was a semi-professional footballer. Their mother Gloria has just got home from a shift ironing clothes. Now there's a brief moment for a family dinner before Alvaro heads out to work a late shift cleaning. These are called elementary occupations that foreign workers are twice as likely to do, The pay is often low, and in this city, rent is high.
Me tuvo muy poco tiempo hasta que yo conseguí trabajo y me vine para esta casa, que era lo único que conseguía, porque me pedían mucho dinero, mucho depósito, y el lord de aquí me pidió nomás un mes.
Eso es muy estresante vivir en esta casa, porque no, ellos para jugar encima de las camas, en el baño, me quebraron una cama porque no tenían más en donde jugar, en las escaleras, que la pelota aquí, que allí, y eso, la gente de abajo que suena la puerta, que no, que mira a tus hijos, que es insoportable, entonces uno lo mantiene agobiado siempre.
The family are now on the waiting list for a social home in Southwark, but they have not been placed in the priority band. Alvaro is now off to work at the expensive, shiny home of London's democracy, City Hall. The capital is reliant on thousands of low-waged migrant workers like him, but it's unable to offer them the suitable housing they need.
So why aren't we building enough houses? It's a question that successive governments have promised to address, but very little seems to change. Joining us now to discuss from Hertfordshire is Grant Shapps, a former Conservative housing minister. And in the studio, I'm joined by Matt Thompson from the Campaign to Protect Rural England and the writer and journalist Dawn Foster. Grant Shapps first, let's talk about the scale. Do you think we need to be building 300,000 houses a year, which is what some people are saying?
Well, actually, I think having been housing minister and looked at this problem, been out of it for 5 years, I've actually come to the conclusion we need to do something far more radical than that. If we're going to resolve the sort of absolute sort of incredible crisis that you were just showing, we need to probably go out and build another 1 or 2 million houses in pretty quick succession. And that isn't going to be done through any single programme that actually, frankly, either I announced or now have been announced by many successive housing ministers who followed me. The reality is, unless we do something on a very big scale, we won't get the entire market back into balance again.
So
and I think that needs a complete rethink.
2 million by when?
Well, you probably need to redress the balance in the next 5–10 years, something like that. I would propose doing that by... I happen to represent here in my constituency a garden city, a Welwyn Garden city. That's a model that works. They're good places to live. And I think we actually probably need to go out and build 5 or 10 very sizable garden cities in the country, not all crammed into one corner of the country either. We need to build them everywhere. And what we need to do is actually start in areas which don't have large populations. In other words, that reduces the difficulty of building when there isn't too much there in the first place and too many people there who'll naturally say, actually, we don't want to build here. So if you go to areas which are more open, and then what you do is actually use a development company and build that. That's how Welwyn Garden City was built, and it is, I think, a successful model. We're not going to get there by just adding on a few more to other bits and pieces of housing projects, which is actually what's happening at the moment.
OK, Matt Thompson, how do you feel about that? 2 million houses at ASAP. I mean, isn't it, some people might say you're the kind of NIMBY who's preventing that happening?
Well, I take issue with the NIMBY point straight away.
But you wouldn't like 2 million houses?
No, I think it's certainly true that we do need to build far more houses than we're currently building. And the question is what sorts of houses they are and where we're actually building them. And that's the key thing for the Campaign to Protect Rural England.
And on the green belt, if necessary?
Well, I would say not, because it's not necessary to build on the green belt. Our research shows that there's enough sites available on brownfield land within our urban areas to accommodate at least 1 million homes. And those are sites that are available for development right now.
Let me put that back to Grant Shapps. On the green belt?
Yeah, no, I'm not in favour of, broadly speaking, building on the green belt. It's absolutely right. It's there for a reason. But also, it's conning people to think that we can just solve the problem on brownfield sites. That's what we say, you know, when we want to kind of reassure people and pretend that we can deal with this in a way that is not actually going to solve a housing crisis at this scale. But I do believe a lot can be done on brownfield, but then after that we have to go, actually, how are we going to get a step change which delivers the kind of housing that we need so that, you know, all of our children, the next generation, the kind of people you saw on your programme, are actually going to get houses.
Yeah.
Unless you can go from where we are today, if you just build another 200,000 this year, that's not going to solve the problem, or the year after, or the year after. You've got to do something else far more radical.
Dawn Foster, do you back building on the Greenbelt?
Yes, I do. I think building on the brownfield is very, very difficult. It's a lot easier to build on it. There are huge parts of the Greenbelt that, you know, people mistakenly think are woodlands, etc. A lot of the Greenbelt is simply scrubland, or it's, you know, golf courses, etc. So I really do think you have to, if we're going to do it at the speed that we need it.
Matt Thompson, then a Greenbelt isn't really all it's cracked up to be.
Well, I think Greenbelt is everything it's cracked up to be, and all of our research shows that Greenbelt's been doing a lot of very good things for the regeneration of our towns and cities, which building on the Greenbelt is just really encouraging low-density urban sprawl that's car development and forcing people to commute long distances across the suburbs when they could be living close to where they work. But I don't really want this discussion to be about whether we build on the Greenbelt or not. CPRE...
But you have to grasp the nettle,
Well, we do, and CPRE, in fact, agrees that where there are exceptional circumstances, then exceptional developments should be allowed to take place on Greenbelt, and that includes affordable housing.
Grant Shapps, you can't really talk about supply without talking about demand. Do you agree with your colleague, your former colleague, Sir Julian Brazier, that immigration is part of the problem here?
Yeah, and first of all, by the way, I'm not arguing to build on Greenbelt. I'm arguing that we have to build on land which hasn't been developed before, which is a rather different point to Greenbelt land. And look, I thought actually Christian's interview there was rather unfair. Of course, immigration must play a part in it, because about a third of homes which have yet to be built in future projections are thought to be being built in future for people who are not yet in the country. It's a reality, immigration. I'm not against it, and in fact I voted Remain. It wasn't my top concern, but it's crazy to say that has no impact on housing supply or demand, rather. Of course it does. It seems to me to be a crazy argument to try and put the opposite.
Well, I'll try and put that crazy argument forward then. If you look at academic studies, and actually in areas that have higher immigration, you actually end up with lower house prices. I don't buy this argument that immigration is causing a huge strain, but also when you look at who is building these houses, look at who is building the houses we need, and it's migrants. We have a shortage of skills, and lots of people come from Eastern Europe. We wouldn't have housing without them.
Just very briefly, if you're not going to limit immigration, in your view, then do you adopt emergency measures, for example, as Jeremy Corbyn has talked about, requisitioning empty properties?
Absolutely. 60% of the public backed Jeremy Corbyn's idea in a YouGov poll. There are 1,650 empty homes in Kensington and Chelsea. I've just this evening spoken to two women who were forced out of their domestic violence refuge, who are living in B&Bs. We need a drastic solution. We need mass council house building. We need people to be punished for leaving... We need people to be punished for leaving homes empty, pushing house prices up by doing it while people are sleeping on the streets.
Very brief thought, Grant Shapps, emergency measures.
Yeah, I've been housing minister. I've rolled out we can solve it all by doing the brownfield, we can solve it all by using the empty homes. But here's the truth, we can't do it all unless we actually build a lot more houses, and we're going to have to do that by potentially building new garden villages, new garden cities, and actually looking beyond some of these traditional ideas we've been hearing about.
I'm really sorry we could carry on talking, but got to end it there. Grant Shapps, Dawn Foster and Matt Thompson, thank you very much for joining us.